All right, tip number 5, what have you got for us?
We have, trick your students to test if they really understand.
Oh, another good one. Trick your students. Okay, go on, tell us about this one.
So basically, it might be just, once you, I'm not saying trick them at the beginning. They have to know what they have to at least like have a model to work from.
Yeah.
But when you are guiding practice in the front, let's say a student makes a mistake. You've asked them a question because you're doing it all together, and you ask one of them a question and tell you the wrong thing. Let it hang there. Let them wait. And see if the class has noticed. And if they haven't noticed, then you can hold them to account. Like, what's going on here? Like, why have you not? Like, this is a mistake, and no one's got their hand up. So do you not understand, or are you just not listening? And so letting it sit there is really nice. But sometimes, maybe one of the few times that I go directly into like when we're doing a guided example, and I do a little bit for them, and I just kind of try and like rush through, do a few little steps. So I want to get to whatever the next part of the lesson is. And then I'll put a mistake. I'll throw in a mistake there and let it sit there for a bit. And I'm hoping and expecting immediately there's a whole sea of hands going up and being like, that's a mistake. And if they don't, then again, you either weren't listening, or you don't understand, and you should have asked a question. But something's gone wrong.
I like this, Sammy, because it feels high risk. That's what I like. I like about it. We're on the edge here.
At its worst, I mean, like at its most harsh. A kid will give a good explanation, like an explanation. It's not perfect, like in the sense that they've omitted details, they haven't said anything wrong. And so, rather than doing a stretch it question to test, you kind of just stare at them, like as if like, are you actually saying that's the answer? Do you really think that? And sometimes you can actually say that you're going with 3 as the final answer. And then if they really understand, then they'll be like, yeah, I do. And obviously also the culture in the room, if you build this up over time, then they come to expect sometimes you're going to trick them, and they'll stick to their guns a little bit. But if they're not convinced, even with the culture in the room, they know that sometimes I'll do this. In that moment, they're so unsure of themselves because they don't understand fully. They'll say, "Oh no, actually that's not mine. No, I was just that was wrong. Let me have another go." And so that just sort of like staring at them or repeating their answer, I think is a really powerful tool because you see if they really are confident in what they're talking about.
This is fascinating, Sammy. So a couple of things on this. I am intrigued just generally about the role that mistakes play. Kind of students identifying and explaining mistakes in learning and so on. And my limited reading on it from research, and I've spoken to Michael Pershin about this, is that obviously common sense says it's really important for kids to be able to articulate why something's wrong as much as it is just to be able to regurgitate right things all the time. But as you said at the start, they've got to have attained some kind of understanding or fluency of the right way to do it before we start introducing kind of the wrong ways and getting them to comment. But what I love about what you do there, and I genuinely do love this, is what I tend to see in lessons, and I've done this myself many times, is the only time I'll ever ask a question like that is when there is a mistake. So like a kid will make a mistake and I'll say, ooh, okay, is this right, everybody? Do we think? And the only time I say that is when there is a mistake. So the kids are like, oh no, it's a mistake. So they suddenly start switching on. I've never once thought to flip it and say, is this right, when it actually is right? But that is like you say, because then they're really on their toes, right? Because then they've got to be thinking, well, he's done this to me before. I don't know which way this is going to go. And I imagine, as you've said, this all comes down to the culture. If this is something you're doing regularly, it's the kids they must just be on their toes all the time with you, Sammy. That's what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, maybe. I've got probably a lot of evidence to suggest otherwise, but I think, it's a simple thing, and like there are probably more important. I'm certain there are way more important tips that people will hear, but it's just nice to have in your kind of your pocket as an option, with no planning needed.
Yes.
Just to test the reliability, and I think that's why I like it, because it's actually a good check of confidence, because when it comes down to it, when they get scared and they realise like, oh my god, do I actually think this? The only thing they can fall back on is their logic and like the reasoning that's got them to there. So if they really understand the logic, then they should say yes, like, that is my answer.
Yes.
And if they don't, then they don't understand the rest of it enough. And so that's fine. And it's not one of those moments where you tell them off or like anything like that. But it's a signal to you that they haven't understood it well enough. And if the class haven't picked up on it, you can sometimes the class, you know whether the class have understood because you can see them starting to like smirk or whatever, like, just to themselves. It's quite a funny moment. But if the rest of the class is just like honestly like, don't really, is that the answer? And you know, like, and as I say, it's not a foolproof. It's not checking for understanding, but it is testing reliability of a student in that situation.
I love it, Sammy. Just one question on this. I have a bit of a thing at the moment, and it's the most obvious thing in the world, but if you're asking a really good question, then you don't just want one kid to do the hard thinking. You want everybody to benefit from that question. And this applies to lots of different things. But it seems to me that this is a real powerful thing that you want every child to be benefiting from. So, okay, one child has said that the answer's 3, and you've then said to that child, are you sure? Is it really 3? Are you going with that? How do you ensure that the rest of the class also benefit from that thinking, and it's not just a moment that's just happening between you and the child?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think always when you specifically ask one student, there's a danger of this happening. And it's about how you, like, sometimes it can be physically just turning to the rest of the class, like just looking, like make eye contact with them and see, like, when you make eye contact with them, you're implicitly saying, what do you think about this?
Yes.
And so, but it might also be like, sometimes if you're genuinely not sure about whether or not they've followed, it might be with, all right, talk about this in your groups kind of thing. But I think you don't need to. It doesn't need to drag out. They'll be engaged enough by the moment that just because it's not part of the course. It's not a normal lesson. The teacher suddenly saying, "Are you sure about that?" That's anything different to the norm in a lesson is more likely to grab their attention. I think. The transformation in kids' faces, like you can almost physically see it. Even though you can't, you can when you start telling them a story about something. It's like something like jolt. Like I'm so interested, and it's a kind of similar thing to that. This is not rigorous scientific research and whatever, but I think it's still like it's fine, and it's a handy tip.
So I think it's a brilliant tip. So just to clarify, sometimes may you formalise that, and it may be a case of, right, everybody have a think on your own, jot it down on your whiteboards, discuss. But more often than not, you get the sense that look and the moment itself will be enough.
Yeah, I mean, with the one where they kind of dramatised, this is the way you look at it. Are you sure? Like that in that, yeah. But if it's a mistake that a student's left on the, like, you've just written down their mistake on the board and you've tried to play it really cool, not change anything about yourself. Yeah. And like if only a few hands go up after a while, sometimes you go well beyond with it and you're like, right, I've got to stop here because no one's put their hand up yet. And I'm asking myself, what are we doing here? You turn it into a big learning point. You go like, right, there's a mistake on the board. Put your hand up when you've spotted the mistake. And in a similar, this is a really good one. When I was saying, if you're doing like trying to get them to spot a pattern, you don't want someone to tell them.
Yeah.
Same for spotting a mistake. I think if a mistake's on the board, a really nice thing to do is just in silence look at the board, and when you think you spotted a mistake, put your hand up, and then you get a gauge in the class for who thinks they spotted a mistake, but then also they've got the space to think about it and process it. And if some of them have their hands up a while, you can be like, write it down and put a pen what you think this mistake is, or whatever. Write down in. So I think that. In those moments, you can really turn it into a big event in the lesson. So the less pantomime moments like that, then you can.
That is brilliant, Sammy. That is brilliant. Well, then.